Hi, it's Jordan. So, there's nothing quite like dating a great woman to help us become aware of places in our lives where we have a lack of awareness and a lack of power. So, one of the things that you'll come across very often if you sit one on one in a date like setting with a smart, sharp woman is that she's going to throw you tests. And a lot of these tests take the forms of questions, and most of them are pretty spontaneous. But what I feel is the intention of these tests is that she wants to know, are you aware and conscious of things of great importance to her? So, do you have a good conscious grasp over the topics of love and over the direction of your life? And if you're found to have good answers to these things, if you're found to be able to pass these kinds of tests very, very easy, then you actually represent a space for her that is safe and trustable for her to relax into. So she wants to know if there is some good solid ground in there. And of course, she's going to ask questions from time to time that show us exactly where we don't have a lot of clarity. So the reason I'm talking about this today is because I just came out of a coaching call with a client of mine who told a story of being on a date with a very sharp, very smart, sophisticated woman a few years ago, and he was absolutely killing it. So the date was amazing. There was a lot of chemistry, a lot of attraction, and they got onto the subject of former partners, and she asked him, so if your last relationship just kind of dwindled out, why didn't you fight for her? And he had that eerie moment of, I don't know what to say. And he did what a lot of men do, like us, in that situation where we don't know what to say. He just tried to fudge his way through it by giving some explanation. And as he did that, he could just notice that her attraction for him dwindled, her trust for him dwindled, and the date just kind of, the fire of the date all dissipated into embers, and that was the last he saw of her. So what to do with a test like that? And I remember getting a lot of tests as well at the start of my relationship. I think it's actually a beautiful thing for two people on the first date, on the second date, in the midst of all the flirtation and magic, to ask each other real questions, because you need to know, like, is there going to be any possible compatibility with this other person over the long term? You want to kind of hash that stuff out pretty quickly, not in a dry trading way, negotiation kind of way, but you want to get answers to that. So it's really good to ask about the lives of others. And so one of the big questions that my girlfriend had of me when we started dating is, so Jordan, you're in your 30s, you travel around the world, and you're really interested in women and intimacy and relationship, and you coach other people on that. So first of all, you're traveling. Why don't you have a home base? Kind of what is wrong with you that you're always on the move? And second of all, if you're this relationship and intimacy coach, why don't you have a relationship, and what's your relationship history? And, how are you broken? Why are you even in this field in the first place? Looking for answers, like what happened to you? Are you just a broken artifact, basically, and a bad deal for me to get into bed with? So just who I am and what I was doing brought up some potential flags for her, and I had to field answers to those questions. And I did pretty well. I passed those tests. But after I cleared that hurdle, I got to the next hurdle, which was, oh, so if you like me and you're curious about having a relationship for real, like, does that make me just a guinea pig? And I'm hit then with the most brutal imaginable question. Are you a guinea pig? And of course, thinking of the question, if I say yes, then that's the most skeptical and trustworthy answer ever. And if I say no, you're not a guinea pig to me, then the skepticism's still going to hold true over that. So I was in one of these damned if you do, damned if you don't moments. And I absolutely got really stuck there. Luckily found a way through that. But in this video, I wanted to talk about fighting for a woman. So what does it mean to fight for a woman? I think just putting that sentence on the table the willingness to take on all the tests, the willingness to go the extra mile, to extend way beyond yourself and fight for somebody, sounds like something of the past. Like men would have done this 80 years ago or 100 years ago, but to actually fight for a woman today just sounds a little bit strange. Almost like the cultural story in the West is, why would I fight for another person? If they don't instantly fulfill my needs quite easily and immediately, then surely just let them go and wait for somebody to come along who does fulfill all my needs. So it's very gallant and very brave, but kind of unheard of. And certainly in some of my cultural conditioning was around women are more than just a pretty face and they can stand on their own 2 feet in life. They don't need a man to fight for them. So I became very kind of passive in my dating life. And if there was some friction or a conflict or some fire was dwindling out, I wouldn't do much to save it because I didn't believe that I had really any right or place to actually fight for a woman. And so that relationship passivity also got me nowhere for a long, long time. So we explored this, and I think there are some really important questions to consider. First of all, what kind of a woman is a woman worth fighting for? How will you know when you meet a woman who's worth fighting for? How much do you need to know about another person until you can get that inner knowledge that, wow, this is a person that's worth fighting for? What does it even mean to fight for another person? What does that look like? What does that sound like? How do you know when you're just fighting for yourself? Just fighting for yourself, or fighting for yourself in a dignified way? How do you know when you're fighting for another person? How do you know when you're fighting for the sake of the two of you, or the relationship, or for love itself? And finally, who in your life do you already fight for? And what does that look like as you fight for them? So the reason I'm excited to make a video about this is because I don't think there's much conversation about it at all in the world of today's dating advice. And certainly in my experience, it's like I had a relationship life when I wasn't fighting for people. And once at some point, this notion of fight and fire and this old school kind of gallantry and staying in it and taking a stand for me and for her kind of kicked in, it changed everything about my intimate life. But it took quite a while and quite a lot of consideration for this to sink in. And I think if I didn't fight for my woman in certain moments in our relationship, we would never have gotten to the places that we've gotten to now. So a couple of final things I wanted to say about this. I think the reasons we don't fight are because of sense of conditioning. It's just not the cultural norm for a lot of people. Other reasons we don't fight is because we're busy. So how can I feel into my urge to even fight for another person if I'm constantly busy with productivity and different things and different goals I have in my life? Profession that demands that I work 60 hours a week. There's not enough time to dwell on the inner impulses to fight for another person. And I think if we consider the kind of great lovers and the great romance stories of history, a lot of these great lovers had a lot of time and space in which they could dwell on their emotions. They didn't have a phone or a Netflix or a social media that they could pick up and distract themselves with. And so the final piece of this is the embodied piece. So for me, to fight for another person is not something I can calculate in my head. It is a fire or an impulse that gets ignited in my body, my heart, my guts. I just know that I have to say something or do something with conviction. And the more embodied I am, the more I can feel these impulses as they strike me. The impulse to fight, the easier it becomes to hear that impulse and then translate that impulse into action and do the fighting motion. So I'm curious how this resonates with you. Do you fight for your relationships? Do you tend to not fight? And what are some of your answers to the questions that I've posed today? I hope this has been illuminating, and I think my wish, knowing the good men that I've known on my journey and knowing the great women that I've met along the way, I definitely have a vested interest for more men to speak more passionately and more vociferously about the things that are important to them and take stands for themselves and take stands for the women that they love and the women that they feel passionate about along the way. Because I think, or I suspect, that there's going to be a lot of single people without powerful, intimate relationships until we really become reconciled with the parts of ourselves that want to fight. I think it's needed and sorely missing. So curious to hear your comments below. If you like the video, there's going to be more kind of coaching-esque moments like this on my channel where I take a certain topic or debate of the day and ask you a bunch of questions in the name of creating more awareness. So hopefully, if you spend a little bit of time considering the questions I've asked in today's video, you'll get a bit more clarity about what it means for you to fight. And if you're on a date and she throws you the curveball and says, hey, you know, why aren't you fighting for this love? Why aren't you fighting for me? Why didn't you fight for the other women in your life? You've got some actual awareness and you can come back to her with a response and sail through that particular test that she sent you and create more trust in the process. So the other personal test that I shared in this video about, you know, how are you screwed up? What led you to be this traveling kind of intimacy and relationship coach? Doesn't that mean you're a little bit weird? Am I just a guinea pig? Maybe I'll cover those in a future video. Suffice to say that these different tests are going to come in all shapes and sizes, and we want them as men. A woman testing us with these things is one of the biggest gifts that we can give ourselves, because it means that we ask the hard questions and we come out of those hard questions with more awareness. A lot of coaches out there want to make dating and relationships more simple. That's fantastic. I prefer to hold up the whole world of dating and relationships in the complexity that they are and to ask complex and challenging questions so that when you find yourself in a complex and challenging mess, you've actually got real power, real self-awareness and real conviction that you can explain and express that's going to carry you through to a more glorious relationship. So that's what I'm all about as a coach. That's what this channel is all about. Subscribe, comment, all the rest of it, and I hope to see you soon.